Are you struggling to do well in math and chemistry? If so, you're in the right place. Hi everyone, my name is Manjari. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up so this video can help as many people as possible. It also really helps me, so I definitely appreciate it. I know subjects like chemistry and math can seem extremely daunting, and as someone who has gone from doing terrible in these subjects to finally figuring out how to ace them, I want to share these tips with you. These tips are unique, they're not stuff that you've already heard on the internet, and I'm trying to keep it as informative as possible. Thus please stay till the very end so you can get the maximum benefit. First tip. This one is obvious, and I'm sorry, the rest are not, but I think it's really important to mention that you have to start studying as soon as possible. Start studying from day one itself. The maximum benefit comes from long-term learning, and you need to be studying and putting in the effort along the way. It doesn't work to study 10 days before the exam when you have, 32 weeks worth of material, so keep that in mind. So what do? You start with doing practice problems. No matter what it is, math and chemistry always has practice problems that you need to do. You can find practice problems online at Khan Academy, in your teacher's office hours, in your textbook. When you're doing this, I want to make sure you understand the difference between recalling information and identifying information. Identifying information is when you have all the information in front of you and you just have to connect two together. It's like the memory game. This type of learning is good for very surface level, but if you want information to stick, you have to do recalling information. What does that mean? It means that if you see a flashcard and you're looking at the front of it, you have to remember that information from your back of your head as opposed to just flipping it around and saying, yes, this is what it is. Or if you have the definition of a word, saying the word is easier than having the word and trying to figure out the definition. So make sure that if you're starting off with identifying information, you eventually want to get to a point where you're recalling information. In addition, when you're studying every day, once you're on day 10, it's really good to review the previous day's information every day. So if you're on day 10, you should be reviewing day 9, 8, and until 1's information, because you want to make sure you also don't forget it. So you need to be refreshing it, and then when it's day 11, you're going to be doing day 1 through 10's information, and then moving on to day 11's information. The last part of tip 1 is making sure that you just don't do this last minute. I think this is just extremely important, and I know it's not unique, but you need to hear this. Learning is best when it's over a long period of time and you're getting a lot of information. In fact, 70% of learning comes from just listening to your lectures. Remember that you can start off with identifying information, but you eventually want to get to a point where you can recall and retrieve that information. Even if you're at week 10 now and you're saying, oh my god, I can't do this, you can. But just remember that if you have 10 days till the exam, you need to be studying 3 hours every day, not 10 hours the night before. Next, on to tip 2. Anytime you're listening to a lecture or any sort of information you're getting, write down every single question you have. You're going through the lecture, you have all kinds of questions. For example, in the middle of my kinetics lecture for chemistry, I have a question. Why is the fast step done like this? Whatever the question is, you're writing it down. Throughout the entire lecture, you're going to write down all your questions. This is better if you do it in like a Cornell note fashion, but it doesn't matter. Any way you do it, write down all your questions. When you're at the end of the lecture, go back and see if you can answer those questions based on the information from that lecture. If you can't, try and find the answer yourself. You can look up online, your textbook, other resources. And if you're stuck, go to your TAs and your professors, ask them questions, go to their office hours, or just email them. If you want to know why this is important, keep watching. If you don't care and you believe me, you can go to this time in the video. This is important because anytime you want to remember information, the more pathways your brain has for remembering that information, the more it's likely to have understood what to do. When you have a question and you've gone out of your way to do 5 different things to try and find the answer, your brain is going to connect all those dots and all these synapses are connecting, and it's just a deeper pathway in your brain for your brain to understand how point A relates to point B. Remember, the more intricate and more detailed you are with your learning, the deeper the learning. So that's why when you're reading the textbook and you're writing down your questions, this works with that too, as opposed to just listening to lectures, and you go back and try and answer the questions, you're more likely to remember the questions and information associated with those questions. And those questions usually relate to harder material, so it ends up being a good thing. Tip number 3 is doing practice problems. This is obvious. I'm not going to talk about why you should do practice problems. It's application, that's obvious. I'm going to talk about the system you should go back when doing practice problems. Obviously, you should try the problems, that's great and all. But once you have figured out the general sort of problems that you were asked, make sure you categorize all your problems into certain categories. So for me, for chemistry, for the kinetics section, the different types of questions that we get are determining rate laws given the pathways of slow and fast steps, writing down half-life and figuring out half-life, using steady state approximation. So I've categorized all these questions into the kind of questions that I'm going to get. Now I can move on to the next step. I'm going to figure out a general pathway for figuring out each and every type of these questions. And we want it to be general enough that it'll actually allow me to solve this question and it won't apply to multiple of those categories that I just listed, but we don't want to be too specific that it'll only apply to maybe one sort of question. So for example, if I'm going to create a pathway for trying to figure out the rate law given that I know slow and fast steps, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the slow step. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write the rate law for that slow step. Third thing, I'm going to write down the other rate laws for the fast steps and try to make it in terms of the intermediate so we can cancel out the intermediate. Why is this a good thing? If you don't care, I'm gonna leave the timestamp on the screen. Anytime you are stuck, even when you're doing practice problems and you're stuck and you don't know what to do, or if you're in the middle of the exam, you have gone through these steps before, you've created these steps. So in your brain, you're gonna go, well, what's step one? I have to do it. What's step two? And you know what? What's even better about this is you at least figure out some of the steps. So if you're doing any sort of free response question, you're going to get partial credit because you've gone through the steps of what you need to do when you see this type of question. It also lets you know when exactly you're stuck. So if you're able to figure out the rate law equation because you know which one step is slow, but you don't know how to write the rate laws for the fast steps, then you know where exactly you're stuck, where exactly you can ask for help, and it makes it really clear for you to understand what you don't understand. So you can actually ask relevant questions and you can get to understanding. Tip number 4, practice active forms of learning as much as possible. The best tip I can ever give you is just do practice questions. Once you've heard the material once in lecture, do practice questions. That is the most active form of learning. If you feel like you need a middle stepping stone, take notes on whatever you're doing. It's best if you handwrite your notes or write it on your tablet as opposed to typing. It's just more intricate and it's a stronger pathway so your brain's more likely to remember that information. When you're doing this, obviously write questions on the sides and make sure you answer them same way as before. You can also make flashcards while you do this. That's also an intricate way for your brain to understand information. And if you're trying to remember information and it's not coming, try using mnemonics and other devices like those, or associate. What I used to do for like vocab words is I would associate one letter of the word with a keyword in the definition. Tip number 5, anytime you have a question or you're struggling with a question, try to do as many steps as possible. That's why we've created this system of how to do the questions. So you're going to go through them and you're going to figure out where exactly am I stuck. Now, once you've pinpointed where you're stuck, you can ask someone else for help. Or you can look it up on the internet because you can see, I got step 1 and 2, this is where I'm stuck, what am I not understanding? The professor is going to help you more easily, your TAs can help you more easily, and you can actually use the textbook to your advantage now because the textbook has so much information that it's really difficult to know if you don't understand a general type of problem. But if you know exactly where you're stuck, it's easier to help yourself. Once again, if you're stuck here, I would recommend before asking your teachers to try and find out help online. Not that I don't mind bothering my professors, but like I said, the more intricate the pathway is to understanding each and every concept, the more likely your brain is to process it and understand it and actually remember it. The last tip is that sometimes you just gotta memorize stuff, and if you do that, you can use mnemonics, you can use flashcards. There are lots of ways to memorize things. I don't think memorizing is terribly difficult for people because literally it is just repeating information until it goes into your brain. It's a very surface level way of learning, but like I said, memorizing has to be done sometimes, like for organic chemistry nomenclature. So I know that was a lot of information in an extremely short amount of time, so I'm just going to quickly summarize everything that I've talked about in this video. First of all, you want to start studying as soon as possible from day 1. Do practice problems as soon as you can. You can find them online, Khan Academy, your teacher, textbook. And remember, even if you're at the last minute, you can still study. Just make sure that you maximize as much time as you have. So for example, if you have 5 days, don't wait till the last day. You got to do it over a longer period of time. You'll definitely learn more. Next, write down every question you have. When you're done with the lecture or whatever you're reading, make sure you go back and try and answer them using your notes. And then if you can't answer them using your notes, you're going to go to your textbook, internet, then your teacher. Next, do practice problems. Use my application method where once you've done all the practice problems, you can figure out a system of figuring out how to do every type of each problem. That way, whenever you're stuck, you can go back to the system and try to follow through the steps, and if you're stuck, you can figure out exactly where you're stuck. Number 4, make sure you're doing active forms of learning as much as possible. This means as little rote memorization and just reading, and at the minimum taking notes, but for maximum benefit, you're going to be doing practice questions, flashcards, mnemonics, and remember when you're doing these things, try to not just identify the information, although that can be a starting point, but do as much retrieving information as possible. The next step is anytime you're struggling was to go back to that pathway that you created of solving each kind of step. This way you can identify exactly where you're stuck and you can easily navigate the textbook for help, and even then you can send it to your TAs and show exactly where you're stuck. They can easily identify and help you fix your issue. Lastly, sometimes you just have to memorize stuff. It's hard to do rote memorization sometimes, but that's not what this video is about because most of chemistry isn't. But like I said, things like nomenclature often just need to be memorized. There are lots of study techniques already I've seen online for memorizing, so you guys can follow those. This is not a video about memorization. Remember, you guys got this. Studying can seem really daunting and that's why we procrastinate, but trust me, once I finally figured out a system to accomplish this, my grades went from C's to A's so fast. I also finally felt more motivated to study because I knew that I really had a good chance of doing well because I had previously done well before, just based on the more active forms of learning I was doing. And I was definitely studying smarter, not harder, because you might be spending 20 hours reading the textbook, but you're just studying harder and not smarter. And this was just me studying smarter and maximizing all my time and resources. That is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. I really want this to get out to people so people can know that it's actually not that hard to succeed at these things. It really just takes figuring out a system that works for you. Don't forget to follow me on my Instagram and check out my podcast. If you don't have really anything else to say, you can check out any of my other videos. I have a study with me that I really enjoyed making, and I have a lot of fitness videos and productivity videos, so check those out. Otherwise, have a great day everyone. Bye!